I can't believe that it's already December. However, as you know, on the Sideshow, Bob, we're very ambitious when it comes to the festive season, especially considering this is a Christian-centric channel. However, let's go straight into it. Coming up on the show, Rachel Reeve's new budget. Of course, her recent fiscal spending rules have kind of disabled her doing any popular decision-making.
Do you want people to trust you?
Yes, and I said during the election campaign that I want people to be able to trust me with the public finances.
Your party, a political party held together with duct tape on socialism and socially conservative Muslims.
The transformation of society to replace capitalism with socialism.
The farmers' demonstration, we are actually now arresting farmers.
We was getting the key out of my tractor.
And an exclusive interview with Roger Quilliam, the member of the National Executive Committee at the United Kingdom Independence Party.
I'm one of the directors of UKIP, so I'm on the National Executive Committee. Happy to say I've just been elected on another 3-year term.
Bobbing around season, we've got the Talk TV interview that sparked controversy across the online sphere when it comes to the discussion around traditional pantomimes and drag queens.
I think it's interesting that a 17-year-old needs to tell you that my generation are being sexualized through the early exposure of pornographic material, including what I would consider drag queens.
The Disciples of Christ demonstration about the persecution of Nigerian Christians.
Nigeria is a reflection of what will happen when we import Islamic fundamentalism.
And lastly, going into definition games when it comes to what it means to be a fascist.
The word fascism is misused in certain contexts.
But in this particular context?
Well, I think it's very wrong argumentation-wise for a single adjective or a noun to replace one's line of inquiry.
All that and more on the Sideshow, Bob. So it seems like a consistent theme of our coverage is always on the scandal of party political matters, including your party.
Of the resistance and those who died for liberty.
The interesting failed project of duct taping together the socially progressive left and the socially conservative Muslims. And an interesting thing when it comes to the Muslim voter bloc is that they've been ostracized by the right. And I've spoken to many Muslims anecdotally, and I'll tell you this for free. They would happily vote for conservative movements. However, a lot of the time when it comes to our discussions surrounding migration, it seems like they're always the focus point. So I do genuinely think that they agree with us. However, in terms of a social movement, they've always been ostracized towards the left. However, going into the Your Party conference, a conference which was mainly pushed by Jeremy Corbyn, a man who, in many interviews, has spoken about wanting to be leader.
Free, free Palestine, free, free Palestine, free, free Palestine.
Was boycotted by none other than his mate, Zara Sultana, a woman who's very much driven by ego. And interestingly, your party has a dual membership. It's one of the only really mainline parties that allows for you to be a member of one political party and another. Regardless, the Socialist Workers' Party, members from Stand Up to Racism and other socialist unions were rejected at the door or even before through a digital email. And it was actually quoted that people had to make their own way there. They didn't like the fact that they made it all the way to Liverpool and were blocked at the door from going. So that happened. Zara Sultana was kicking up a fuss. She was saying that this old labour of bureaucrats and people secretly in the shadows kind of controlling the momentum of the party is something she moved away from.
There are people around Jeremy that have learnt the wrong lessons from their time in the Labour Party and where they have been on the receiving end of witch hunts, of smears, of leaks to the press, of acts of sabotage and intimidation.
However, I think it's something that she's caused within herself. It's interesting how she discusses about the destructive elements of her political party, even though she was the one to control the membership portal on early release. She was the one that went out on a statement and called it a sexist boys' club. And she is the one that, in my eyes, she's being Islamophobic. She's denying the right of members to express religious political positions on issues such as transgenderism. And you saw this throughout the conference.
For my part in this, I am sorry. I think what we have seen is a group of people who wanted a party that was led by MPs, and me fighting for maximum member democracy from the outset. Even when it came to the Conference Arrangements Committee, I wanted it to be gender balanced. Me and Jeremy had agreed that in setting up the Conference Arrangements Committee, it would be gender balanced, it would be racially diverse and regionally diverse, and that was not accepted.
And this speaks largely towards the people that your party are going to be attracting. When it comes to the upper middle class socialists who are very puritanical in their position, so puritanical they don't even consider the Greens a socialist movement. I think that if I was speaking on behalf of the left, I would have just moved towards the Greens. It's an embarrassment. There's a reason why everyone on the right has essentially united under the Reform banner and haven't been bothered to, move en masse to another political party. It's because we understand that regardless of their flaws, the only electorally viable party is going to be Reform on the right and Greens on the left. Now, when it comes to the run of Corbyn, I think that he could actually get some momentum if he was allowed free rein. However, during the conference, and the conference sort of ran like a parliament, you had different panels discussing on issues, different topics, different solutions, and you would vote for them.
Instead, we've had stage-managed debates about whether or not we're a socialist party or whether we're an anti-austerity party. We have not discussed a workers' wage for party officials.
Really? Can you cut the mic, please? Can I ask to cut the mic, please? Can I ask?
It was actually established that it would have a collective leadership. So you have Zara Sultana, who didn't get anything she wanted from the conference. And then you have Jeremy Corbyn, who didn't want anything from the conference, only his leadership. But no one sees Corbyn as a new face for the left.
Our party, your party, this party, we have got to be in the forefront of the fight against racism and discrimination in any form whatsoever in our society.
Because your party represents a new option on the left, and he's a very old face who oversided the Labour Party, which already has its stigmatism. Continuing talking about socialism, it seems like the fiscal spending rules of Rachel Reeves' budget has kind of simmered down in towards the agriculture that actually feeds and is the beating heart of this nation. I was actually live on the ground reporting for Vox Populi on the farmers' demonstration, and it seems like regardless of on the 11th hour, it being Section 12 and Section 14, for tractors not being able to actually go into the heart of London, they still did it.
If giving in was an option, I would consider it, but it isn't, so I don't.
And surprisingly, the police actually had the backbone to enforce their sections, which in my eyes is an optically terrible thing to do. I mean, you're literally taking and arresting farmers.
I asked you several times to follow the conditions. Get up to my tractor to get the key out of it. We wanted you to protest safely, but you're not following the instructions. I was getting the key out of my tractor.
Spoke to many of them on the ground. None of them knew that it could have been a crime to protest in the wrong area. Imagine you tell someone that, just random geezer on the street, yeah, if you stay here, you're going to be nicked. That's absolutely ridiculous. In the same breath as well, protesting is meant to enact pressure. As much as I didn't like Just Stop Oil, they understood this fact by blocking traffic, in the same way that the tractors would be blocking traffic because they're incredibly slow. I spoke to some farmers saying that they needed to get on the road with their tractors at 1 a.m. in the morning just to get there in time for London. And this demonstration started at 10 o'clock. So that went well. It was around discussions about, fertilizers tax, the recent reform to inheritance tax.
I'm really lost now.
Essentially, farmers are going to be taxed on the ground when it comes to their property. And really, farming isn't a rich business. It's only something that is inherited down generationally. And it's wealth accumulated across the generations. Because you don't make a lot in farming. It's pennies on a dollar. So I ultimately suspect that regardless, and I spoke to a 16-year-old, I'm just going to see that now, a gentleman who said, regardless of what happens, we will continue to feed this country.
So do you think the farmers across the United Kingdom, regardless of what the government do in terms of subjugation, in terms of unfairing, taxing these people, they're still going to feed this nation?
Yeah, I think we should all stand together, try and sort it out. That's what we're doing here today. And I think if we worked all together as a country, we'll be able to make it eventually.
Now, going into the budget, I actually think Rachel Reeves did a relatively good job. The only thing I would disagree with her is, and mind you, they did recently lie about the figures. They talked about 60 billion black hole in the spending, which essentially means they need to increase tax in order to make this black hole up.
We don't need to increase taxes further. We need to do two things now. We need to reform our public services to make sure they work better, and we need to grow our economy.
That wasn't true, was it?
Well, the budget this year was not on the scale of the one last year, but as I set out in my speech at the beginning of November, the context for this budget did change, and I did have to ask people to contribute more.
The only thing I would disagree with her on is on the two-child benefit cap. Now, of course, a plea of poverty with someone who has more than 2 children should absolutely be covered for. However, the way she afforded it is in a terrible way. She should have done it in other ways that Labour advisors were recommended, is that you remove the cap, however, you keep the cap on how much someone can owe on benefits. Because what you then see is the poorest families will continue to have children because they believe that they can receive the money for it, and then that disciples a low quality of children in terms of their education, affection, and just general care. I mean, this is why you're seeing, in my eyes, a poor generation of illiterate children. It's because they're only really made for the sake of families to have the benefit money to continue spending on other things outside of caring for the essential needs of your children. It kind of alleviates attention that each family will receive per child. However, she had fiscal spending rules, which meant that she couldn't raise certain taxes and she couldn't cut certain essential services, which is something that she should have never have done. Labour would have won regardless if they had this virtue signalling in. And it just meant that, like Kemi Badenoch said, you can announce one thing and that would break your pledge. However, that's only going to make the markets respond poorly, because she said that she was going to increase income tax. That meant the markets respond poorly. This was 3 weeks before the budget. Then she reverts, does a U-turn and says, no, we're not actually going to. And the budget have responded relatively well when it comes to the budget. So this sort of mismanaging, and you even saw the budget got released hours before it was released in Parliament, that this Labour government just does not know how to run officially a country. So our special guest here today is a gentleman that I have been familiar with, actually starting out on activism. I think the first time we ever interacted was during the Azerbaijan protest for the Disciples of Christ. He is a member of the National Executive Committee at UKIP, and he's also done some work at Turning Point UK. So may I further introduce Roger. How are you doing, my friend?
Hi, young Bob. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
So just quickly on what actually you're a part of, what your role is at UKIP, do you mind going into that? And then we can go into further on how you stood for the Caerphilly by-elections, because it's always interesting how Welsh politics kind of goes into play.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the directors of UKIP. So I'm on the National Executive Committee. Happy to say I've just been elected on another 3-year term. So yeah, we basically, we're the executive committee, so name is on the tin.
So in terms of the way that you see UKIP growing, what do you think the direction will be coming out of the festive season? Of course, UKIP's a party which has only really been in the spotlight in terms of media coverage because of the demonstrations in areas like Sheffield and Whitechapel. What do you think the direction of the party should be?
Yeah, so under Nick's leadership, we've seen a lot of growth, and really the key idea is bringing activism and politics together. So these protests that we're doing, there's monthly demonstrations. The idea is to get people motivated and inspire them to come out and actually get involved in politics, because you look at how many people don't vote in every election. It's something like 40% of people who are registered to vote don't vote at all. And these are the forgotten people, the working men and women of the country who feel like they've been left behind by the establishment, by the uni party or the tri party. And UKIP is always been about people above politics. I hate politics, but that's precisely why I'm in it, because if you don't get involved in politics, all that's going to happen is you're going to let sociopathic careerists have positions of power who don't actually stand up for what they believe in or might not believe in anything. So that's the idea behind the activism of UKIP now.
And speaking more towards the broader aspect of UKIP's activism, you were recently actually in France. You were documenting the way that the NGOs kind of carry these undocumented men to Calais, to Dover. Do you want to talk about quickly what you can about your experiences there?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting experience. You see all the footage online of the migrants coming over on the boats, but until you actually go there yourself, you don't really understand how big of an issue it is. Like how Calais and Dunkirk have been just turned into these dumps and rubbish everywhere. Campfires, people sleeping on the streets, thousands of them, just walking around constantly. We saw the French National Reserve, the military police patrolling these areas. We spotted some undercover ones as well. But they don't really have any power to do anything. And it's just insane. This has been going on for, that's part of 20 years now. And successive governments have been absolutely useless. And so the only way you're really going to get exposure and pressure is by going there yourself, documenting it, just keep on putting that stuff out. And to actually confront the migrants themselves. We actually interviewed a human trafficker from Afghanistan. He was with two young Somali boys, and he just told us what his plans were, where they were going, why he was there, that they were coming to England, and they just don't care. They know that they're not going to get caught. They make thousands and thousands by doing this. It's just human trafficking. It shouldn't even be controversial. It's simply the status quo. It's saying that we should deport illegal migrants is the exact same as saying we should jail murderers and rapists. And the government is deliberately pushing this.
And interesting you say that, because ITV and other legacy media corporations have actually discussed on the broader issue of what they would say far-right activists being in Calais and Dunkirk. And they actually included prime time a video of Nick Tinconi saying that he is part of the cloth of far-right and how he's exacerbating issues when it comes to like xenophobia in this country. And I just want to know, what do you actually think towards the further hatred that he's received? I mean, your organisation has been threatened by the Muslim youths of Whitechapel. How do you feel that there is so much sectarian violence on our streets?
Yeah, it's all part of the smear campaign. I mean, they've been doing this for 100 years or more. It's it's a communist tactic to just label anyone as a fascist or a Nazi or far right, because that way they are able to control the narrative and control the culture, and basically oust anyone and bully people who don't fall within line. This is what communism does, and it's just the latest attack. Not much more to say on that really, but you look at the sectarianism, and you look at the rise of people are grouping together on ethnic and religious lines in this country, because the cosmopolitan lie that we can have all sorts of people from all over the world with completely different backgrounds and cultures and religions being mixed together in a small island over a very short period of time. And, it's a complete lie. It's a complete utopian dream, which is unachievable. And the only way to actually have unity is to have homogeneity. We need a monoculture. We need assimilation.
And, of course, that is spoken of so much in terms of the election. It seems like Reform are gaining in the polls. UKIP kind of being, and these other parties like advanced the way by which you make Reform more right-wing through shifting the Overton window, including a video by Farage actually talking about your demonstration through Whitechapel, using it as a way of justifying his rhetoric towards sectarian violence. And an interesting discussion was always brought up about migration in Wales, because of course they have schemes to facilitate migrants, from Ukraine and other countries. So you actually stood in the by-election for Quilliam, being the only political party in the area to go against the Senate and abolishing it. What is your experience in canvassing for a very controversial political party?
Thank you for asking that. It was a great experience. We are the only party now who actually is a unionist party who wants to keep the United Kingdom together. None of the other parties come close. And part of that is our anti-devolution view. We think you can have a stronger, less bureaucratic government by ending devolution. Wales did have an abolition party a few years ago, but they're hardly active anymore. And so UKIP is that strong voice to actually stand up for the union. Lots of great feedback, knocking on doors. People, there was that famous clip of the Reform candidate on the debate on TV, and they said something like, "Oh, there's only about 3% foreign population in Caerphilly. Why do people care about it?" Caerphilly is a perfect town to put a migrant hotel in. If you're the government, it's a pretty small population. The geography is just set up perfectly for it. What I was saying to people is, imagine if a migrant hotel was to be put in your town and your children were scared to walk home from school, or your sons got involved in gang violence. And a lot of people took that on board and they said, yeah, like we have solidarity with all these other towns across the UK. And we don't want that brought here. It's incredibly selfish for these, comfortable bourgeois liberals to say, oh, I love my curry, I love my multiculturalism. I don't have to deal with illegal migrants. Meanwhile, it's the people who are typically from working class backgrounds in these communities which actually have to suffer from these unknown men.
I think as well, especially your protests becoming more mainstream actually contributes to this consolidatory, because you're going into areas that are actually affected by it. And it seems like with the march in Whitechapel, you're more speaking about the Islamic fundamentalist perspective on migration, which more leans to not only just illegal migration, but legal migration. So can you just quickly go into UKIP's migration policy?
Yeah, so the Whitechapel protest, it got moved to the posh area, the Gucci Muslims in Knightsbridge, because the police were being two-tier. And all we were saying is, we stand against extremism, we stand against Islamism. We don't want our country to be colonized. And it's a pretty popular message, pretty mainstream position on that particular point. And that the police moved us for it. So we've got a deportation plan. Obviously, all illegal migrants have to go. That, again, like I said earlier, that's the status quo. It should be a centrist position adopted by all parties. It's just ending crime. It's ending human trafficking. But illegal migration is the real issue. Illegal migration, to me, seems like a bit of a scare by the government. It seems like an operation. Why are they coming over on these tiny dinghies that would be so easy to collapse or deflate? Why are they being put up in hotels? Why are they being put in military bases? It seems to me like a psyop. And it's actually to cover up the real fact that millions and millions of legal migrants have been coming in and completely replacing our people in our boroughs of London and in our areas of cities, and like Manchester. And it's colonization, and particularly the Islamic aspect of it. Islam is a dominant political religion. It seeks to spread the caliphate across all corners of the world. And they don't necessarily do it through violence, like the typical sort of historical view of colonialism being military dominance. Although, of course, there is lots of violence. We've had the 7/11 bombings and many terrorist attacks, like the Manchester Arena, by Islamic terrorists. But simply being able to come here and outbreed us and use our benefit system, that in itself is a form of exploiting our system and replacing us because they hate us and they despise us, these radicals.
This video is sponsored by Defiance Records, fantastic music company with Ramis and Mad Mix and Trevor John. Great music, really non-woke stuff, none of this transgenderism and wokeism. My friend Elon would greatly recommend it. It's brilliant stuff. We love it so much. I love their music personally. It's all of the hits that I use at my conference. So please visit their music. It's great.
Going more towards how we originally met, it was when I think I was 14, 15. And I just stumbled across your group of people, Jack, Nick, yourself, at a Turning Point demonstration. So I think it'd be at this point very appropriate to speak about Turning Point, what you thought at the death of Charlie Kirk. How did you respond to it? Where were you? I think that's a moment because social media pushed the very gory sort of episode of his death. Everyone knew where they were when it happened. So do you want to just go into that?
Yeah, so I've been with Turning Point for a couple of years, helping as a cameraman, helping with social media, things like that. And funnily enough, I was actually on my way home from our recent trip to Calais. While I heard the news, we were driving home, me and my team, and we received the news that he'd been shot in the head. That's what the news said at the time. And we were just hoping and praying after watching the video clip, because it was everywhere on social media, that it was potentially going to be somewhere lower down, like his collarbone area, rather than through, his artery, his jugular. And it was very frightening. All we could do was hope and pray, because he was a bastion of the conservative movement, and he wasn't even an extreme far right, nowhere near that. He was pretty moderate. So if they're going after him, if the radical left, the violent left, are going after someone like him, what does that say about people like us, who actually might be more extreme than him in his views, or more radical, or at least more patriotic, more nationalist, more conservative, or whatever word you want to call it. So yeah, I was staying up all night. It was a late night, and I just stayed up all night watching the TV and basically waiting for the news to hear that he passed away. And yeah, it brought tears to my eyes multiple times. It was very shocking, very traumatic, because such a young guy like him, he was definitely going to be the president one day. He had charisma, he had talent, he had a vision for the country. He was able to actually galvanize millions of young people, and not many people like that actually come about. So no, they destroyed one of our top guys, but they didn't destroy our movement.
And speaking more towards the movement here in the UK, the last 5 years, because of the way that campus operate, it's extremely difficult to do stands. But now we've been able to get invited slowly, do stands in universities. What do you think the direction is for Turning Point UK? What is Charlie Kirk's legacy in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, obviously, massively different country. It's like you said, it's been difficult for Turning Point to actually get stands. You can't just go in to a university. It's privately owned. They'll just kick you off the campus, and if you don't leave, then they just get the police. Unlike in America, where you've got lots of universities being publicly funded, you're allowed to just stand on the public land. But like you've been doing, Bob, there are a few universities, especially in London and a couple down south, where you are able to set up sort of outside the university and get a bit of interaction, or if you actually know someone at the university, you can get invited on, permission. So I think we are in sort of the regrowth phase. For a long time, we've been focusing on protests, like against Drag Queen Story Hour, and against immigration, and standing up for patriotic values as well, things like the Palestine demos. But yeah, doing stands and doing interactions gets your message out, I think, a lot more effectively, because you get the clips, you get all the YouTube views and all that. So, yeah, I hope that we can do more. You've got to continue Charlie Kirk's legacy. If people just stand down and they say that they're scared of political violence, then you will just let the tyrants win. And that's a story as old as time. It only takes a few good people to actually change the momentum of this country politically. So I support you in what you're doing, Bob. Hopefully I can come down to one of them soon and see what it's like.
Well, thank you so much for having yourself on. Is there anything else you want to say in terms of how we can find you on social media? Will you actually be standing as a UKIP candidate? But besides from that, thank you so much. You can just kind of lead yourself into a closer.
Yeah, so you can find me on X at Roger A. Quilliam. That's ROGERAQUILLIAM. That's my main platform. Yes, I will be standing as a candidate in a more local area to me this time. The Caerphilly was obviously a by-election, and we needed a candidate. But I'll be standing somewhere more local to me and really getting a big campaign out. In that we've got local elections coming up, we've got the general election. Who knows? That might only be a year or two off. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. And we need to just keep the nationalist, patriotic, conservative movement alive and continue to grow it through as many means as we can.
Now, I feel like activism has kind of thinned out, but regardless of what happens, Bob is always on the job. And with the Nigerian persecution, I think over 50,000 Christians, it could be more, have been butchered by Islamic fundamentalist groups such as Boko Haram. You know, we've always been at the Disciples of Christ heavily leaning towards talking about their persecution. And the BBC actually came out with a statement talking about how they kill other groups, especially moderate Muslims, but these are just terrorists. And they want to go after other people in form of collateral damage, but their main mission is to eradicate Christianity. It's because if you interpret the Quran and certain other Islamic literature properly, they are put on a mission to suppress other religions which claim to be the way, the truth, and the light. So that demonstration went on. I had myself, Tinkoni, and Jack Ross from Turning Point UK all speaking on the matters.
On a micro level, we already see sectarian violence on the streets of Britain. But on a large scale in Nigeria, what we'll see is on an industrial scale, a religious persecution of the Christian faith.
Today's top headline: I now own the BBC.
BBC ain't telling the truth to me. BBC ain't telling the truth to you. BBC, oh, but that speech ain't free. BBC, it's running your brain.
And it comes at the same time that the BBC misedited the Panorama documentary, in which case they adopted one clip that happened 54 minutes after they put the other clip in. And typically, you know, if you were going to splice two videos together, you would make it very obvious through an effect. Like, I don't know, we do at Turning Point with like the whitening effect, because it shows that you're transitioning one clip to another. However, that's not what the BBC did. They made it very intentional to put B-roll in between each segments of the speech to ensure a clean transition, and acting like it happened at the same time, even though at one time the march didn't start and in between the other it had, trying to argue that he incited violence.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
And of course, if you look at the other operations within the BBC, they have seen to be biasly reporting on Palestine, favouring the activists on the street when it comes to the coverage of that war. The last thing I'm bobbing around was something that actually sparked a lot of controversy that's surrounding the near Turning Point UK demonstration on Drag Queen Story Hour, in which case what had happened is a man pretending to be a woman through wearing fake breasts had in last year actually performed adult entertainment for people over the age of 18 and is now going to do a story time on Christmas to children between the ages of 0 and 5 at Richmond Theatre on the 19th of December.
The fact is that 5-year-olds are too young to explore this material, and even teenagers. I mean, if you look at the average age of pornography consumption, it's about 11, and I think there's a correlationship between...
It's even 8 in some countries.
Yeah. think there's a good correlation between the sexualization and the exploration of gender identity with their consumption of pornographic material. They're hypersexualizing these children through transing them. I mean, why would you need to explore your gender identity at such a young age when things aren't so concrete?
At Turning Point UK, we always believe that the sexualization of our young generation contributes towards their outcomes, politically speaking, because they just believe that this is normal behaviour.
Funny men dressing up as funny women carries on a tradition which started in the Victorian music hall.
Pantomimes are a bit different, and here's the distinction. You know, pantomimes, you know, you have over-exaggerated poses, you may have a squeaky voice. However, it's nothing of the sexual variety.
I don't like an effeminate dame. It's got to be butch for me. The moment it becomes effeminate, it's wrong. To me. But other people like it, fine. But I mean, to me, it's sexless. You know, warm, friendly, big bus. Hello?
However, within the older generation of the LGBTQ, like Stonewaller community, they'll all tell you that drag queens are meant as a form of adult entertainment, right? It's like the difference between someone dancing on stage and someone exotically dancing on stage. There's two different audiences being pulled from the same media, so to speak. And even a GB News presenter said, Paul Bobbs hasn't even went to a pantomime. Now, I have, in fact, performed in one myself. I even, you know, once on one occasion dressed up as an ugly sister for a performance. It's not something that's new to me. I understand that we have a long tradition, especially within the Shakespearean era, of cross-dressing. However, that's not meant to be taken seriously, and it's not been used to sigh up a population into the LGBTQ movement. So I think that largely dressing up like a woman should stay out of the vocabulary of children. Don't confuse them as much as they are at that age.
I think it's interesting that a 17-year-old needs to tell you that my generation are being sexualized through the early exposure of pornographic material, including what I would consider drag queens. I mean, they sort of uniform women as over-sexualized characteristics as a form of uniform. I don't think you consider it flattery that they think a woman is someone in big breasts, dressed up in a dress with a long hair. I think there's more of womanhood to that.
Got 1.2 million views, and even the Minister for Trade commented, arguing that the right-wingers shouldn't take pantomime seriously, which is absolutely ridiculous, and if he wants to come on the show, he's invited to do so. So, we had a very posh gentleman at the London School of Economics discuss on fascism, and I'm going to quickly go towards the definition of fascism, then we'll play the clip, and then that will be the end of the talking point segment. So, fascism is a more militaristic form of communism in its certain practical application. So what I mean by that is, firstly, it's an ideology that believes that, by and large, everyone is a component of the state. And you saw this within Nazi Germany when it comes to women, for example. They weren't valued based on their own individual merit, but rather how many children they could give to the native Aryan race. You saw this in the military. Men weren't, again, commemorated on their individual merit, but rather what they contributed to the wartime effort. So this economically as well, where the German Workers' Union is the largest union within human history, outcompeting other Soviet unions within Soviet Russia. Again, you had within the private sector, outside of it just being a name alone, there was no sort of material substance of privately owned property. It was all controlled under the state. If you're a company within the time of Nazi Germany, you were owned, or you were the CEO was a member of the Nazi Party. Everything went back to the dictator at the time. So all of it is the exact same. All of the tropes are exactly the same with communism. It's just more militaristic. It more focuses on the heartline of the country, the identity of the state, and what you ultimately should be fighting for and violently expanding. And this is why I think that a one-party state, what we're comparing towards the neoliberalism of Nigel Farage, is completely laughable. I mean, just now, before the show started, I saw a picture of a political spectrum that put in the same sort of zone Benito Mussolini, Oswald Mosley, the Nazi Party, and 30p Lee and Nigel Farage. These are people's ideas drastically differ.
Hello.
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 I will actually try to be serious about this. There's no point in making a joke out of this.
But what do you think with the previous theatrics coming out of a few of the students here calling us, saying that fascists must come out of our campus? Did you agree with that sentiment?
Look, according to law, freedom of expression allows for insult in any context.
Of course, but do you agree with that? That's the question.
We agree with their right to call us fascists. We're asking if you think they're correct in doing that.
Yeah, is what they are saying
Well,
true?
I think
It's
the
the
word...
same. Sorry, go on.
Look, the word fascism is misused in certain contexts.
But in this particular context?
Well, I think it's a very wrong argumentation-wise for a single adjective or a noun to replace one's line of inquiry. So it's not something I would do personally.
But okay, regardless from the fact that it's improper grammar, do you agree with the genuine intention of the person that's giving it? I.e. that I supposedly align with the ideology of fascism, therefore I shouldn't be allowed on campus, which I don't think is true. I'm not a fascist, and I think anyone, regardless of their opinion, should be allowed on campus, because traditionally universities, we're built on this diversity of opinion and building up from there, you know.
There is such a thing as harmful opinion.
Do I have harmful opinions?
Depends on how one defines malice, because harm stems from malice.
Well, let's explore that a bit more. So, two questions to yourself then, if you're saying there's such a thing as a harmful opinion. A, what constitutes a harmful opinion? And B, what should be done about it?
Well, harmful opinion... Well, there are two types of harm. The one is the very traditional definition of harm stemming from thinkers like John Stuart Mill, as in, I act, or my opinion acts, as an active impediment to your acquisition of happiness. That's the very traditional way of looking at it. I'm not even going to discuss physical harm, because you're not physically attacking anyone.
I mean, they do to us.
But like, so that classical definition of harm, where I impede on someone else's will to be happy, I think that, especially within law, isn't practical. So, for example, how many people are happy that I'm here today? Not that many people. So, me being here has impeded on their capacity to be happy. That doesn't exactly mean that legislatively that should reflect the fact that I'm supposedly committing harm against someone, and typically we agree that someone who commits harm against someone is, breaking the law. So I think we should get away from that sort of...
Are you certain that you want to restrict harm? As a law student, I'm asking you, are you certain you want to restrict harm to law?
Well, in terms of this discussion, yes, because they modified the statement "I'm a fascist" with the fact that I shouldn't be on campus.
Well, the premises of the discussion are very limited.
Well, yeah, because
legally,
you can have a certain moral framework that dictates that definitionally harm is in this way. However, when we talk about law and commonly morals are conventions when it comes to government. It's just typically what we all agree to. There isn't like a justification commonly in Parliament of why we've banned rape. It's just, most of people agree that it's wrong. So, when you modify the statement that I am a fascist and therefore off the merit of my fascism I shouldn't be allowed on campus, it then becomes a legal discussion on how firstly we define these words and whether the definition of these words apply to law.
Look, concerning fascism, I think that, well, first of all, if you ask for my opinion, you are not fascist.
Good. Does everyone agree I'm not a fascist?
Well, because look.
Oh, so
fascism,
I am a fascist.
Look. Relax.
Great.
Relax.
Okay, I thought it was socialism for everyone until it's for no one.
Relax.
But that's the point. That's the nature of our discussion. The same way I would define fascism.
Fascism is a matter of fact, historically speaking, and there are many types of fascism. First of all, we start with classical Mussolini fascism.
Yeah.
Which...
Well, there's two camps of defining fascism. One through looking at its historical context, so being in the more school of thought of Mussolini, and more of just abstracting from history and more just looking at the actual ideological definition.
You have to abstract from somewhere, and all forms of fascism have been murderous, bad, and destructive.
I agree, yeah. But apparently I'm murderous destructive according to these people.
To define how fascism may present itself in our society, we have first of all to, define the type of harm fascism did. Well, there's the one part of actual, murder, the destruction of human life.
Can I quickly go through it? So, the many issues with fascism is the same in socialism. So fascism is this understanding that we prioritize the collective over the individual. So if you look at economically speaking, the two different apparatuses of socialism and fascism is the way that it would put the economy. So fascism privatized the...
I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
but I don't think that I understand the point from finance. However,
even socially.
The main and biggest problem with fascism.
No, but the reason why
even
I said
socially,
that, the reason why I said that was socially, but because you have this understanding of the collective instead of the part, which is the individual, you limit someone's freedom. And this actually expresses in itself when people on campus say that I am not free to do something based off the merit of my opinions. And in a similar way, a fascist society says that we should value someone based on the collective. So I gave the example to the original person that was speaking with me, that Aryan women were valued based on the amount of children that they birthed, that men were valued in terms of the militaristic output.
We are going off tangent.
Now, if you like that show and you want to contribute towards the Crossing Corner movement, please go to crossingcorner.org. You can go in the shopping section and get yourself a nice hat and mug. Or you can just donate towards our organisation. All money goes towards fueling a Christian movement here in the United Kingdom. Can't advertise the dates or location now, but I'll just put it out there that we are doing a Christmas party that will be live streamed at the E Speaks Freely YouTube channel. But outside of that, God bless you all. May you all observe a nice and beautiful Christmas celebrating the birth of our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. And God bless you all.